you guys remember Damned? Well, I didn't because I didn't even have a functional brain at this time. But that's not the point. Damned was the first proper asymmetric horror game, although not that popular, laid the groundwork for all of the future games to come, like Friday the 13th, rip to that, and this game laid the groundwork for the game we're going to talk about in today's video, Dead by Daylight. And this game is really popular now, and although the game started off really basic and primitive, the game has really evolved over time, with FNAF being in the game now, and with this being the first game to popularize this genre. And so I thought it would be fun to look back at the players' reactions and theories to the game from players back in 2016. And if you do enjoy this video and would like to turn this into a small mini-series, just let me know in the comments down below, and let's go back in time almost 10 years ago. When this game was announced, there was a decent amount of chatter about the game, especially with the game getting around 10,000 wishlist on Steam, and there was already being games like Evolve that were already had small little communities looking for other games to play, with old forums talking about the game, people saying that they wish the beta could go on until launch, which I thought was quite nice to see. A lot of players were enjoying the game before release, not to mention there were quite a lot of faults with the game, a lot with balancing and bugs, with there being an infinite loop that you could just run to never take a hit from the killers, and just early hate of face camping. Another thing to note on that, by the way, which I thought was quite interesting or quite cool, was the fact that people used to call it sacrifice camping. And I get like obviously when you put them on the hook you are sacrificing them, but I don't know, I just thought that was quite interesting. But yeah, speaking about the beta release though, a lot of prevalent creators were posting videos about it, like obviously Markiplier and Jacksepticeye, which is quite cool to see, and obviously it would have definitely brought a lot of eyes to the game. There were people already talking on forums about it as well, with a lot of players saying that it was quite popular on Twitch at the time before release, with the main take from this guy saying that he thinks it would be pretty boring without friends, but the main premise was quite promising, with the main criticism being that the game was too basic and bland, and just not having enough features. And obviously with this, it can obviously be expanded upon, and they can obviously keep adding features to the game. So this is some good criticism to have early on. There were a lot of theories about the game at the time before release, with the character bios being made public online, with people talking about the entity and how the characters were brought to Dead by Daylight, with someone saying that the hellish area you spawn in could be like hell, and the survivors are being punished for things they did, while killers are demons and the entity is Satan. And they also mention that it could be similar to Silent Hill 2 with Pyramid Head, which I find kind of funny because this character got later added into Dead by Daylight. So there could be some validity in that, but the entity being and obviously with what we know now, it's somewhat true, with the entity being this puppet master kind of pulling all of the survivors and the killers in. Now, when the game fully released, it did decently well, with players and critics praising its originality and concept, and people saying that the game could be short-lived and obviously plagued by lobby issues, especially on launch, but Dead by Daylight is whip smart, original, exciting, and genuinely frightening, especially at launch, which I believe is true, but not exactly now. And that's the question I want to ask you guys. Do you guys believe me when I say that the older Dead by Daylight was more scarier than it is now? Like when I used to play the game back in the day, I used to be terrified of running from a chase, and nowadays it's not really that scary, and I feel like it's the fog that definitely had a big impact in that. But just comment down below if you believe me or not. Things I thought was funny looking back on it was the gameplay, and yeah, it's really weird now looking back, but before you comment, but this was in 2016. Yeah, I know, just saying, the people back then were not bad. It's just quite interesting looking back to see how people actually enjoyed the game and played it. And there was a lot of people running around the map, and just lockers being a big thing, everybody hidden, and especially now, nobody really uses them unless they've got perks for it. And there were a lot of throwing pallets and just running, and especially with the animations being extremely slow. I can see why people would be doing that, because especially vaulting, you're gonna take a hit, even if you tried doing that. Looping was practically impossible at the start. Not that anybody knew about this, but you know what I mean. There was a lot of bog standard, just throwing pallets, running, a lot of just trying to run away. And obviously with the fact that the killer is faster than you, it wasn't gonna work for most players. But the start of Dead by Daylight was just the beginning. The first few months after the release were chaos. The game had tons of potential, but also tons of problems. Killers were slow, especially when placing down traps. And also, speaking about traps actually, there were quite a big problem with it, I'm not gonna lie. Yeah, if you can see it on screen right now, if you're looking at the screen right now, you can see the problem here. You're able to place bear traps right under the survivors, so when they try to unhook, they get trapped, or they're gonna have to set the trap off, so you're gonna be immediately alerted of where they are, and that's why the trapper was extremely OP off the bat. Obviously, the survivors had broken loops, and the fog made it almost impossible to see. People were constantly posting clips of weird bugs or unfair mechanics, and the forums were filled with players arguing whether or not the game was killer-sided or survivor-sided, which, let's be honest, is still going on 9 years later. And this game was still growing slowly, with the player base climbing, especially without the game having a console version at the time as well. That was something really holding it back until patch 1.6, when the game actually had console versions released. And by this point, the Shape was already added into the game, a killer that still haunts my nightmares to this day. And the Doctor was here as well. And the game was receiving some quality of life improvements, with some players becoming quite good at the game at this point. And the meta was changing as well, with killers not face camping as much as they did back in 2016. And during 2017, the meta had survivors dominating with looping and obviously healing, while killers relied on a few strong perks to keep up. And this imbalance added a lot of fuel to the fire early on in the game, and kind of kickstarted this debate. Which side was more sided? And a lot of people around this time was talking about this. 2019 was a great time to play Dead by Daylight. Bearing in mind, I played this game around this time on Xbox and had so many fond memories of it. There were some great maps added around this time, which the community really does still like to this day. Maps like the Temple of Purgation and the Underground Complex map, which is still pretty nice looking maps. And a pretty good map to play on as well, as long as they don't have the Blight or any other character that can fly across the map like the Oni. But yeah, there were a few problems with the maps, however, and obviously a few controversies around this time. The Spirit having a really OP add-on that made it so when you used your phase walk, it would not make us noise queue globally. It would only make one within the terror radius, meaning that if you were across the map, you were not hearing the Spirit come to you at all. It just basically made the Spirit extremely OP. I mean, yeah, the add-on was ultra rare, but it still made it really easy to get kills. And, you know, it was just a really terrible thing to keep in the game for a while. And it was just, yeah, obviously, as I said already, easy kills for the killers. And obviously, people complained about this for ages on Reddit posts until it was finally fixed in November of 2019 by making it globally heard instead. The Legion was a killer memed for being the worst one in the game at the time, and even nowadays, it's still not really the best, it's still average, but I have quite a bit of fun playing with the Legion, and it's still totally viable now, but back then it was awful to play as Legion. The community was still just toxic as ever, people complaining about everything and every little small detail, and, you know, the small amount of people still praising the game. And with its updates and fixes, it was perfect to play the game in 2019, and I don't know why people were complaining. I don't understand it. Survivors that were added around this time was obviously Nancy Wheeler, we had Steve Harrington, and obviously characters that I still hate to this day, perks-wise, but they are still a much-needed characters in the game. And I feel like they were pretty good additions, and obviously the community seems to still like them to this day as well. 2020 was another big year for the game, with loads of new killers. Obviously the Deathslinger was a killer that was originally praised for his concept, but its ADS delay was pretty divisive. Oh my god, what was that? There were some pretty nice maps coming, like the Dead Dog Saloon, which I still believe is too small of a map to this day. But it is a fun map, it's just too small. And at the same time, a lot of people, still 2 years later, say this map is too killer-sided. And I can see both sides of the argument, but I think it's fine how it is. Like, I've had countless games where I've had quite a bit of fun, and especially as Survivor as well. I don't get this. It's, you know, this, in my personal opinion, this is not really a thing that should have been happening. The Midwich Elementary School map as well, I absolutely hate for looping, and that's my personal opinion, but people at the time were saying things with the balancing of the map being unbalanced for both Survivor and Killer, and a few stating that just because it's a DLC map does not make it automatically balanced. The hallways had a massive line of sight that means the Killer could see you across the map if they wanted to, which made doing gens and trying to escape a pain. but at least they did fix this specific problem with patch 8.2, and that was just 2 of the maps that came out around this time. And it has had quite a few of the tone of this game has become a lot more critical over the years, to the difference of the early years had shown more like excitement and novelty, and obviously the later years have shown more frustration as it's gone. And I can understand that some players don't want a killer or a survivor who can run around in circles like Tom and Jerry for 20 minutes and win the game. It's something that's gonna happen, isn't it? It's bound to happen. If you have a good player, you know, if you have a good player, especially with the perks as well of some characters, you can end up having to chase them around. And at the end of the day, it's a competitive game. It's a skill game. You're gonna be there a while trying to chase someone down, and you know, you just gotta play the game properly. Obviously, there was a pretty unique theory that I heard when researching around this time, and it was that some survivors might actually be killers, or just altered by the entity a little. And the Legion's a good example. It has like 3 other constructs like Frank, Julie, and Joey, along with Susie, the one we play as, and Susie is the only one that kills, which is quite weird. I mean, like, take that with a hint of salt. I'm not very well versed in the story of Dead by Daylight, to be honest with you, so that could be completely wrong. But I just saw someone on Reddit, I'm pretty sure it was. It'll be on the screen anyway. But yeah, they were making a theory about that, and I don't know, it just sounded a bit interesting to me, and I wanted to say it on the video. The community was not always toxic back in the day though. It wasn't that bad actually, but with how this game is now, anytime a new update is dropped, there is always going to be someone that has something to complain about. And it can be seen even worse with obviously teabagging and killers, face camping, and obviously tunneling, and even slugging. And now all these things I just mentioned are not inherently bad if done in a good situation. Like say you face camp someone when it's endgame, you know, and you just want to kill. And that's happened to me pretty recently, and obviously I was pretty heated, but obviously the killer said my bad in the chat, and I was like, that's it, you know, it's fine, it doesn't matter. And same thing goes for slugging. I mean, like, if there's a survivor that's just gonna just basically chill right next to you with a flashlight when you down someone, who's to say you're not going to go for them? And obviously tunneling, but that like is pretty shitty for the most part, I'm not going to lie. Now, moving into the later years, from 2020 to 2025, Dead by Daylight really hit its stride. The game was no longer just a niche horror experience, it became a massive crossover for horror fans, kind of like Fortnite in a way. Characters like from Resident Evil, Silent Hill, Hellraiser, The Ring, Alien, and even Five Nights at Freddy's now. Like, come on, that's sick to be fair. Join the fog. And some we have already talked about. Each new chapter brought excitement, but also controversy, and players obviously complained about perk overhauls, MMR, matchmaking, and constant meta shakeups, while others praised behaviour for keeping the game alive nearly a decade later, which is really good, and I think we should have a nice clap of applause for that. Like, the introduction of bots, obviously, you know, which should have been added earlier on, let's put it that way. But the introduction of bots, solo queue improvements, and quality of life updates made the game a lot more accessible, even if some veterans felt it had lost its, like, horror edge. But by 2023 and beyond, DBD has fully evolved from a buggy indie horror game into a cultural phenomenon at this point, but not without growing pains. The community is still split between killers and survivors arguing over balance, just like it was in 2016, as we said earlier. Yet, despite all of the drama, the memes, and the occasional raging of streamers and players alike, people keep coming back. The game that started with just a few survivors running from the trapper in the woods now have dozens of killers, maps, and crossovers, and it's still going almost 10 years later. Love it or hate it, Dead by Daylight has cemented itself as the ultimate horror experience, and the Steam player numbers obviously say something to that as well. Now, I hope that this video has given you an insight into the players of 2016 and beyond. If you enjoyed this video style, then please do comment down below and let me know whether or not I should do this again for another game, and maybe just, you know, maybe just comment saying a game I should do. I don't know, up to you. And as usual, subscribe to the channel, it helps me out tons. And yeah guys, I will see you guys next week for another video. Bye bye!